pull that mic right into you.
Got it.
And I think we can do it, Simon Pegg.
Excellent. Thank you.
A lot of times I forget to actually say who I'm talking to. But I could take care of it.
Game the audience can.
Yeah, I take care of it in the intro. So, how long you been in the States here this time around?
We got in from Sydney about a week ago. We got in for Comic-Con, so we started off in Wellington in New Zealand. We left the UK. We did everything we needed to do there. Went to Wellington, went to Sydney and Melbourne, and then we landed in San Diego for Comic-Con, which is like obviously landing in Mos Eisley Spaceport.
Sure, and it's definitely not New Zealand.
No.
It's like San Diego. It's like, it prides itself on its beaches, but it's not New Zealand.
No.
I've never been to New Zealand, but what'd you do in Sydney? What'd you do in New Zealand? You're just pushing the movie?
Yeah, well, we had Peter Jackson has always sort of, ever since Shaun of the Dead, he's been quite a supporter, and we did a little premiere there for Hot Fuzz, so it felt right that we go and do something for the World's End there. So Martin Freeman was just finishing up at The Hobbit. He's also in the film, so he was able to be there. We just did a little, an event at the Embassy Theatre there, which was nice, with him sort of introducing it.
Peter Jackson was there?
Yeah.
So he lives there all year round?
Yeah, it's like he's the king.
I would imagine.
He's like the emperor of New Zealand.
He's the guy that's kind of supporting their country on some level.
Absolutely. I mean, he's the kind of the very center of the film. He's got an amazing little thing going on out there. It's the
studio.
Yeah, the most amazing post-production and, outside Hollywood. It's incredible. In this little island in the Pacific, there's this...
Have you been there before?
Complex. Yeah, a few times.
It's beautiful, right?
It's amazing.
I've never been there.
It's like Scotland crossed with Middle Earth. I mean, it really is. It's kind of strange.
It's like Scotland without Scottish people?
Exactly. Well, no, there's actually quite a lot of Scottish people.
Oh, are there?
Yeah. There's a whole Scottish community down in the South Island. There's a place called Dunedin, which is like a little piece of Scotland.
Are you Scottish?
My wife is Scottish.
Really? Full-on Scottish?
Yeah, like full-on.
And
Glaswegian.
Glaswegian.
Yeah.
I've been to Glasgow.
Have you?
Yeah. I've never had to acclimate to more people throwing up in the street in my life.
It's amazing on a Saturday night. It's like...
But it's really amazing coming from America and knowing like there's such a thing as a drinking problem.
Yeah.
But you go there and it's just sort of like you realize that this happens every weekend here.
Oh my God, it's incredible.
It's fucking insane.
I've never seen so many people lying down on concrete.
Yeah, on concrete or just halfway done with food and sleeping on the It's crazy. And like Sydney, so you see the thing I don't like, because I'm sort of I'm not I don't travel that much, but I think that people who grow up in the UK, it's part of their life to just travel to the countries that to me are very exotic.
Yeah.
So you've been to Australia many times, or?
I have, but I didn't travel much until I didn't leave the United Kingdom until I was 19.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, I hadn't been on an airplane until I was 19.
Really?
Yeah. I look back on that now and think, it's incredible.
But why is that? It wasn't like you were...
We just weren't very well off. We never had holidays abroad. A lot of kids went to Europe for their holidays, but we went to Devon, which is in the south of England, which is about as sunny as it gets.
Is that a beach?
Yeah, no, it's like an area. It's a beautiful part of the southwest, but it's I had beautiful holidays there as a kid, but we never kind of did those package deals to Malta or Mallorca or wherever the British people go. So I went to Germany, was the first place I went. And I've made up for it since. I mean, it's ridiculous.
You go everywhere.
Yeah.
It's great, right?
And I've been to Australia quite a few times.
Yeah, Australia's neat. I mean, it's like I've been to Sydney, I've been to Melbourne, and then there's part of me that's like, is there anything else really that...
I know. Well, the funny thing is, if you could probably fit of the entire Australian population into a small market town in the UK.
Right.
Because it's all around the outside.
Right.
And the amount of personal space over there is insane. It's
crazy.
Yeah, everyone's got like at least 50 meters each.
Yeah, and it's also like there's part of you things like, what the hell's going on in the center? I mean, there's got to be things. Like, did you go out there?
Yeah, I did. I went to the Northern Territory. I went to Uluru, as it's called now.
Yeah.
Which was used to be formerly Ayers Rock. The Rock, formerly known as Ayers.
Right. Does it look like Mars? I mean, what's out there?
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, it is like a huge red wasteland, but beautiful. I mean, awe-inspiring.
Sure. So you say you didn't travel much. I mean, how did you grow up? I mean, what was the
parochially?
Yeah. What did your family do?
I grew up in a little place called Gloucester.
Yeah.
The original Gloucester, not Gloucester, Massachusetts.
Right. No, I've been to Gloucester, Massachusetts. I was hoping it wasn't that one. It's okay. It's nice, but
it's like I think the two most famous people to come out of Gloucester are me and a serial killer.
Two different paths.
Two different
but
paths.
both creative.
Could have been me. And weirdly, I worked at the same place as this guy as well.
No.
At one point. Yeah, I punched the same clock as this guy.
Are you serious?
Fred West, yeah.
Did you? But how are you? Are you age similar? Or
No, he was older than me.
Oh, so he preceded you at the job.
Yes.
Yeah.
He was. I was actually working as a caretaker at an industrial estate where he worked when I was about 19.
What does that mean? A caretaker,
like a janitor.
Oh, okay, all right. I think the janitors here should maybe use that. the janitors sort of stigmatized, but caretaker.
Caretaker sounds nicer. Sounds like someone working in the mental health industry.
Exactly. I was assisting the industrial estate. They had problems. What's an industrial?
It's so lofty. That's so British. Everything sounds slightly more elevated.
That is true. That is true. I mean, I'm always sort of impressed with it, and I feel intimidated by it. But now I know. Caretaker's a janitor, and an industrial estate is what?
You guys, it's kind of like, it was a trading, I don't know, it was like a retail, no, it wasn't even that. It was like a factory, basically. Right. It's like you guys say sidewalk, and that's what it is. It's the side of the road. We say pavement.
Oh,
that sounds so regal.
Yeah. We rarely use the word pavement unless we're talking about a band or
Stephen Malkmus.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, like, what'd your old man do? What kind of childhood did you have there?
My dad was a musician.
That's great.
Yeah, but amateur, but very good. He has a lot of a jazz and blues band, which he's always been.
What's his instrument?
He plays the keyboards.
Really?
Yeah, and he. But we had a music shop when I was a kid, and he still sells pianos now. That's his living.
Oh, really?
And my mum kind of worked in personnel throughout her life. She's retired now.
But so you had the artist in the
but my mum was a big amateur dramatics fiend. That's why I got into acting, because she was big in the local drama group and was always doing plays, and I was always hanging around with theatre types.
What is see, this is something I'm not familiar with. What is they had community
theatre, yeah.
Oh, okay.
We call it Amdram.
Oh, okay, Amdram.
Yeah.
And she would, her and some ladies that you knew from the neighborhood?
Yeah, like all these people, but it was an amazing centre of it was inspirational because it was regular people who were putting on plays and rehearsing it on their evening, just for the love of it. There was no sort of monetary gain in it whatsoever.
And the people would come from the town?
Yeah, and it used to be that it was like one of the biggest events of the year was the local musical. They put on Carousel or Brigadoon or something, and the whole town would come and watch it.
So it's sort of like it's sort of like high school drama in a way,
yeah,
like where
with adults,
right? With adults,
yeah.
I think that's sort of what theater was supposed to be for.
I think so.
I mean, like a community sort of event that moved you through emotions as a group.
Absolutely, and you'd have these microcosmic celebrities as well, which would be local people.
Right.
And it would be what we see now as the world of entertainment, but writ small.
Right, and with lower expectations.
Low.
No, the same expectations. That lady who worked at the flower shop stunk in the lead.
Yeah. They were minimal.
Yeah.
But if someone was quite good, it would be, my mum was very good. She could sing and she was a good actress. She won awards at that level and kind of inspired me, so that when I got to about 15 and the idea of actually following it as a career, which was completely bizarre where I was from. I was in the Tatooine of England. It was like the furthest from London you could get, it felt like.
What was the main sort of economic momentum of that area?
The docks, probably.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was a. The thing about Gloucester was it had these incredible docks. They're still used for filming.
Yeah.
But Gloucester is in a valley. So when the Germans were bombing the UK during the war, Bristol and Liverpool, which were two other docks, were flattened. But Gloucester, because when they switched the lights out, it would disappear.
Ah.
So the docks stayed intact, and it was like this vital port. And so, I guess it was the docks. And
so it didn't need to be rebuilt. It's sort of like a historical sort of significance.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's still used as a location because it has, it looks authentic.
Yeah, and so when you were a kid, were they functioning?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And we had other sort of like chemical, like ICI was there, and
but it wasn't full of crime and thugs.
No,
Gloucester. It wasn't.
Gloucester is very famous. I saw it once on a TV show in America because we have this tradition, which I thought was completely normal, and utterly rational.
Yeah.
Where on May Day, there's a hill in Gloucester, in Brockworth, which is the village I was from, which has a very steep face without any trees on it. Every May Day, they roll a cheese down the hill, and all the local boys chase it. Every year someone dies. It's incredible.
Someone dies chasing cheese.
Somebody is at least no. I mean, one person died once, but there was
cheese tragedy.
There's always a cheese
tragedy.
There's always like broken ankles, and it's ridiculous. The guys get hopped up on cider and they run down a virtually sheer face in pursuit of a piece of cheese and damage themselves. And it's like
it's not even a bull.
It's
not a heroic tale to your children why you can't walk.
It was to do with cheese.
Yeah,
it's called the cheese roll, and I remember I was staying in LA, and I was watching some show called Foreigners Do the Stupidest Things,
and there you are.
Yeah. And there it was, my tiny village. I was so proud.
Yeah, I bet it was a real moment for you. Look, we are contributing.
I know. I never realized how bizarrely stupid we were until that moment.
So you get a lot of, like I'm not particularly what one would call a nerd.
Yeah.
But you seem to be a nerd hero.
I think so, yeah. I think because we've kind of, what we've done artistically is embrace that popular culture thing. I'm a child of popular culture, really, is what I am. You know?
Was that because, I always wonder, because like when I was a kid, I mean, I'm a little older than you, but I spent most of my time just, being miserable and listening to music and drawing things. But it seems that, you seem to immerse yourself in everything else.
I did a bit of that too. I mean, I was, I listened to the Smiths and sketched skulls.
Good. I just wanted to make sure. But so when did you go to college, and did you, what was your original pursuit?
Yeah, well, what happened for me was, I think the ground zero moment for me was I was 7 when Star Wars hit, and that had such a kind of seismic effect on
And it's a
me.
theme throughout your work.
Yeah. And because it kind of I don't know, it's sort of, it was a cultural bomb for me. It's sort of when I trace it back to a lot of my interests and some of my interests in music and literature span from it and stuff. And
really?
Because I was 7, I was a kid.
Right. So that's when they get you.
Yeah, that's when they attack.
So when you first saw Star Wars, you're like, holy shit.
Yeah, I was. I walked out of the cinema like, what the fuck was that? I felt changed. It was strange.
Well, I think a lot of people did. And do you feel like it sort of gave you a sense of story and a sense of everything else?
Yeah, it made me interested in a lot of things. Films I'd already, I loved the Ray Harryhausen movies and that kind of stuff as a kid growing up. But
those are British movies?
Yeah, like Jason the Argonauts and his animations.
Like the Sinbad movies.
Yeah.
The many armed things.
Exactly, yeah. Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger was the first film I actually remember going to see.
Those were pretty spectacular.
Amazing, yeah.
Yeah, but when that was all there is, you kind of accepted those special effects.
I look back on that and think how amazing it was that we suspended our disbelief. Nowadays, if Transformers looks a bit shonky, it's rubbish, it's terrible. You saw that robot wasn't real. Of course it's not real!
Yeah, exactly.
It's like when you're a kid, you believe anything because...
And that was it. That was the best they had. I mean, do you ever watch black and white movies like Godzilla? And you're like, and it's just like or the Moth one where
it's like a man in a suit.
Yeah, the Fly where the guy's in this giant rabbit suit or whatever the hell it is.
And you buy it because you
want to.
We're never not aware that we're watching artificiality. It's just we're getting more and more petulant about what we stand for in terms of looking real. Do you know? And I used to watch. I was a huge fan of Doctor Who growing up.
Right. There you go. That gives you your nerd credibility.
Yeah.
That in and of itself.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's more nerdy here because it's foreign. At home, everybody watched it. It was a mainstream show.
Right. And there's only a couple of channels in Britain, right?
There was 3 until 1982.
I see. That's the intimacy of the entertainment business in the UK is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Yeah, because here, and that's why, they're Anglophiles here that are just like, this is so special.
Yeah.
But for you guys, it's like, it was a couple seasons, and now, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That was on for 2 years when I was a kid. But
the whole thing is much different. The whole idea of, the length of seasons, the amount of seasons. And when it was 3 channels, you'd have to make a choice. It was like, okay, so it's BBC One, BBC Two, or ITV. And you chose what. Nowadays, I think the ridiculous surfeit of choice.
Yeah.
You just flick because you always think there's going to be something else. There's going to be something else.
Right.
You had to settle back in the day.
Yeah. But I think that was better. I think when it was a more intimate industry, I think that a lot more people were on the same page.
Absolutely.
Now you live in a world of did you see that thing? It's like, how would I fucking see that?
Yeah.
Where did you see it?
I know.
Where do you get that? So people actually look for things that no one has seen before to celebrate them, and that's the big thing. The search for media that is completely hard to find.
And also we own TV now. It used to be this emissary from it was like a box that we didn't even own that was in the corner. You had to sit down when it told you to.
Right.
And watch stuff that it told you to watch. Now you can tape stuff and you can GVR.
You can watch just pieces of it.
Yeah,
the good parts.
Yeah, on your phone.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's good or bad. Do you have thoughts about it?
This is the thing. Is it good or is it bad? That feeds into a lot of what with The World's End is about, this idea of nostalgia. You think, oh, was it better when that coffee shop was run by an old man?
No, I love that part of the movie, and I like the movie a lot.
Yeah.
And I think that it definitely hit on that stuff. But your character is such a broken man.
Oh yeah.
And I certainly relate to the idea that things were better in high school, but the fact that his life was so small, that the one thing he was holding on to was this tremendous excuse to continue to be alcoholic.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's that thing that we often lament the past, and talking about TV like that, I genuinely feel maybe it was better, but was it?
I only think it was better in the way that it enabled us to communicate more collectively around things that happened.
Yeah, because we have more common ground, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that, technology in general is sort of a wedge between, real communication. But I think that the witnessing of an event on television that everybody sort of had to sit through.
Yeah.
Was amazing. Like now, even if something horrible happens, people are like, I don't know which coverage I want to watch.
Yeah, you're flicking through.
Right, which commentator do I want to listen to while the world is ending?
Yeah, it's so true.
It's weird. So, like, now people don't even want to talk. They'd rather text. It's like when you see a phone call come in, it's like, oh,
yeah. I can't be bothered.
Yeah, right.
I'll write to you.
But there was a time where, that was all interconnected.
Yeah.
So I think on that level it's bad. I'm glad we figured that out.
Also, we had a great comedy double act called Morecambe and Wise, who were the biggest thing in the UK back in the 70s. Their Christmas show in like 1976 pulled in 32 million viewers, which is half the population of the country watched that show. I mean, half the population of an entire country watched one television program.
Right.
This would never happen again.
No, never again. Not unless all electricity died and we were only able to get, that was all we had left.
Yeah.
But in talking about Star Wars, like, I have to assume that, because like that first one, I think the first one was written by Lawrence Kasdan, right? Or the second one?
The second one was. The second one. Yeah.
And these are guys that, were drawing on Joseph Campbell stuff. They were drawing on stuff that, like, I didn't really put that together. So there was the mythology was effective.
It was, because it was grand kind of ideas.
Yeah.
And I have this whole theory that its impact was, because it came when it came, just after the Vietnam War, and America was feeling very kind of insular and didn't know what was going on, because suddenly they were hearing stories about their own soldiers doing bad things, and the ideas of good and bad suddenly got all muddied, and all the characters in the cinema were like Travis Bickle and Bonnie and Clyde and the Corleones, all these darkly, twisted, sort of ambiguous heroes.
Right.
Suddenly comes along this young blonde boy in a white pair of pajamas going, I know what's what!
Yeah.
And everyone went, fuck yeah!
Yeah.
I get it! And it made so much sense, and that's why it inspired so many people here. And that wave of inspiration just spread around the world. So by the time it hit the UK, everyone was saying, this film is the biggest thing ever. Everybody in America loves it. So we're like, okay, I'll go see it then. I'll go see it. And it was one of the most incredible models of marketing and success in the history of cinema.
And it's interesting because, all those other film heroes that you mentioned, they come out of the same crew of filmmakers.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
All those guys, you were either going to go one way or the other. And most of them went the way that's like, let's get dark. Let's get, let's explore the horrible underbelly of what our society is. And Lucas is like, fuck that. Yeah. Let's go to space.
That's so true. I wonder what they thought of him,
And also they did American Graffiti. I mean, he did American Graffiti too, which was also, like, it seemed like his way of doing things. Like, that was a complete nostalgia flick.
And a massive success. And it enabled him to make crazy little space film,
But it is nostalgia, and I never really thought about that because that came out a little earlier, but it was still, America was still kind of recouping from Vietnam and stuff, so he's like, fuck that, let's go to the 50s.
And even Star Wars is nostalgia because it harks back to those kind of RKO serials and a simpler time when the bad, you could tell who was bad and who was good.
Sure, the guy with the black helmet and no face.
Exactly.
That was easy. The Nazi helmet and no face.
Yeah. It's so much easier to kind of, in the face of all that ambiguity and sort of self-searching that was going on.
So in space, throughout the series, there's this undercurrent of the Phantom Menace being a real problem.
Yeah.
Is it a problem for you?
It was just very disappointing. It was just kind of 16 years waiting for it, and then suddenly it was like, oh.
But you're a grown man. Weren't you waiting for it with a certain amount of like, well, this, he doesn't really need to make any more? Or were you one of those people that sort of like, it's not finished? I
know. I was the trailer was very good. And then and then it was disappointing. We're all sort of, I mean, this is the age of. We've been so infantilized over the years. I mean, you think about how grown up our
I'm wearing
parents
diapers.
were. I look back at my dad when he was like 20, and he looks like he was 70 to me.
Absolutely. That's like there was a time where if you look at like Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
And he died at 27.
27.
It's like, how the fuck is that possible?
I know.
The guy looked like old beyond his years. He was wise. People seemed to be, dressed properly.
You think of the Beatles wrote everything between 21 and 28?
It's crazy.
I mean, they'd finished by the time they were 28.
Yeah.
I'm 43. I'm carrying a Boba Fett helmet around with me. It's like, what?
Yeah, we don't know how to. Like, I think that somewhere along the line, that's right. The infantilization led us, who are approaching middle age. I mean, I don't know what to wear.
I know.
Like, I just don't. What's age appropriate?
Still wearing silly t-shirts and shorts.
Yeah,
and
I
stuff.
tried to get away from the silly t-shirts. Yeah, I am wearing a silly t-shirt.
No, I wasn't referring to
No,
yours.
I know, but it was good.
I think the weird thing is this is all predicted. I remember being studiously reading John Baudrillard at university and him talking. There's this big
Baudrillard, yeah. Which one?
Called America.
Great, it's great. The
Great
one with
essay.
the coffee table.
That's
style
right,
book.
yeah.
Oh, it's great.
And that has a whole thing about it, about infantilization, about how the populace is being encouraged to consume childish things because it kind of keeps us in a state of arrested development and makes us easier to control.
Yes.
And now you look at all the big films.
Yeah.
They're all childish things. It's all space and superheroes. Even if you dress it up in kind of like moody darkness and have Superman not wearing his red pants, it's still Superman.
And yeah, exactly. And also, it also creates a populace that never feels quite complete. Like that constant, that need. It's like, when's more? How come I can't? It's shiny. So you read Baudrillard in college. Was that what was that? Were you into filling your head with that stuff?
Yeah, I loved all that stuff. I kind of wrote my dissertation on popular cinema, like Star Wars and Raiders and all that.
What was the angle?
It was like a Marxist overview of hegemonic discourses and.
Wow.
Yeah.
I
can't think in those terms anymore.
What's a hegemonic discourse?
Well, hegemony is like, and this also feeds back into the World's End because the bad guys in the World's End are a hegemony. They're a kind of like non-aggressive force of change. So we're controlled basically by an ideology which kind of tells us what to think insidiously. It makes we consume certain things. If something comes along which is kind of counter-cultural, it's rather than being stopped like they would in a communist country, it's embraced.
Right,
and made harmless.
Big Brother is watching us, and that's what we pay him for.
Yeah, it's like punk. Yeah. Say punk comes along, punk. It throws everything into chaos, and but gradually, then you start being able to buy punk wigs in joke shops.
Right, it gets appropriated by by the marketplace.
Yeah. Like Monty Python is a great example. Monty Python, really subversive, very funny, but it's on the BBC. So the very sort of the very thing that it's satirizing is the thing that it gives it to you.
That's right.
And by that it becomes.
But the British were able to deal with that.
Yeah,
they allowed it
absolutely
because they realized that satire is healthy.
Yeah,
and that that there's a long tradition of satire. I mean, here's something goes on TV in one of the major networks. If it pisses off three people who have the wherewithal to write an email, they're going to be like, "We're sorry."
I know, which is crazy.
It's fucking horrendous.
And I think there's an argument that comedy, as a form of change or satire, is actually reactionary because it enables you to experience the feeling of revolution. You're going, I hate you, but then you just go back to normal afterwards.
Right, I hate you, and that's hilarious.
That's why I love, you watch, The Daily Show is a show that we just don't have a satirical program like that on British TV.
You don't?
No, and it's really, really. I mean, it's really biting, and the Colbert Report, it says things that we would never see on British TV.
But why is I mean, you wouldn't be able to answer that, but it seems that there are political satirists in Britain, and that the lines are drawn differently in Britain.
Some very good ones,
yeah. So when you were in college, you were writing about Star Wars, you were doing a Marxist critique of it.
Yeah.
And what did you end up graduating with? I mean, what was your plan?
I got a BA in theatre, film, and TV.
Yeah,
2-1, which is quite a good mark.
Yeah,
and I wanted to be an actor, but I went to university rather than drama school. And during that period, I'd always been interested in stand up and as a performance thing. And when I started learning about acting and I realized that I might be at the mercy of casting agents and other people's decisions, I kind of wanted a bit more autonomy. So I thought, I'll be a stand-up because I love stand-up, and I used to listen to my dad's Bill Cosby albums when I was a kid.
And, the best.
Yeah, and so that's what I did. And I went, rather than becoming an actor, I went into stand-up and was a stand-up for quite a while before I sort of drifted back into acting.
So how long did you do stand-up for?
I guess for about 10 years.
And who were the guys that were you were hanging out with? Because I know a few British comics. I've interviewed Stuart Lee.
Yes, Stuart.
I've interviewed Simon Munnery.
I supported Simon Munnery on tour. Yeah.
And I interviewed. I wanted to interview Jerry Sadowitz, but he was too sad. Apparently.
Yeah, he's had some issues at Jerry. I think.
But I mean, when somebody turned me on to Stuart Lee, I was like, holy fuck.
Yeah, he's a brilliant comic. I mean, someone whose satire is utterly, searing.
Yeah, and it crushed him for a while. I mean, he had to take a break.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't feeling received or understood.
Absolutely, because he's got so much integrity. He's not prepared to do anything other than what he believes in.
Right, and that was a big lesson I learned from him. It's like, he realized when he was disappointing people, that, instead of getting angry at them, his big realization was like, what I'm doing is going to really be what it is.
Yeah.
I'm sorry you made the wrong choice tonight.
Yeah.
There's nothing I can do.
Which is so admirable. I've seen him live before, and he's stunning, I think.
When you did stand-up, who were the guys hanging around?
Well, Simon and Stuart were definitely around. The big names at the time were sort of Frank Skinner, Bill Bailey,
who you worked with on your show.
I did, yeah. Bill is an old friend. I was working with people like Boothby Graffo. Who else did I support? Sean Locke, who's a very good comic. It was a very vibrant time. The early 90s in London was a great time for stand-up. There was a lot of sort of smaller pub clubs. It's been corporatized now a little bit, weirdly, getting back to the world's end again.
Yeah.
The sort of jongleurs, those kind of slightly more, guys after work kind of comedy clubs.
Yeah, it's a little disturbing, isn't it?
Yeah.
What kind of stuff were you doing primarily?
Mainly kind of whimsical, sort of observational, surreal sort of stuff.
Yeah, and what'd you get out of your experience? 'Cause, I mean, you're in it 10 years. I mean, you could have been in it for the long haul.
I loved it. I really loved it. And the only reason I stopped was because the TV took over, space took over, and I didn't have time to stay match fit with, you gotta
stay in shape.
Yeah, you gotta stay in shape.
Sure.
You gotta
get in the ring.
Yeah, you do.
Keep that connection to that audience happening, or else you're going to be frightened in your corner.
Yeah, because you go 2 weeks, don't you? And you come back and you're like, I'm shaky.
Yeah. I know how to do this, right? I know how to do this.
Yeah, and I tell you what it was. I went on tour with Steve Coogan for a year.
Yeah. He's a guy that I'm just like now getting, to know. And I know you did, what was the Alan Partridge
Alan
stuff?
Partridge, which is incredible.
It's like that's all, that whole world is new to me.
Yeah, it's brilliant. There's a new thing he did called The Places in My Life. You've got to watch that.
Doesn't he have a movie coming out?
He does, but I don't know. That's going to be interesting to see, because in that he'll be a hero. And I always think Steve works better as a kind of
the guy who's getting the short end of the stick. Yeah.
But he makes me laugh more than most people.
But the Alan Partridge thing is sort of a satire of British television personality.
And he's this monstrous TV presenter, and it started off in a radio show, and it became really popular on a show called The Day Today, which is one of the most incredible news satires ever made. I often think that there are parts of The Daily Show which draw on the kind of that bombastic pomposity that news has.
Yeah.
The Day Today was that, and then he had his own chat show, and he's just done stuff ever since.
But he was a stand-up.
He was kind of like an impressionist, really.
Oh, really?
And he did a number of characters, and I went on tour. I supported him on tour for a year, and I was doing his show, and I was doing my own stuff, my own character comedy in his show. But at the end of '98, I'd done this TV show called Big Train, which is a sketch show, which was in a very sort of Python-esque, sort of very surreal, very funny show. And that led to other things. And I hadn't done any of my own material for a year. And I got to the end of that year and thought, oh, geez, what am I going to do now?
Right.
But just at that time, other things took over. And so almost by accident, I left stand-up behind as I had been doing it.
Well, let's talk about the British television industry a little bit. So you were able to create space with Edgar and with what's
Jessica.
Yeah. But it seems to me that, and I might be mistaken, that if you pay your dues in the UK, and you're visible, and and you come up with a good idea, that you'll probably get your opportunity.
I look back on Space and think, that was fucking lucky that we got that show made. We got approached. We'd done a show for the Paramount Comedy Channel. There was a producer that had left to go work for a company that was related to ITV, which was the third channel.
Yeah.
He said to me and Jess, can we make a vehicle for you guys to be in? They were looking for stuff to make at the time.
And had you worked on stage together, or?
No, we'd just been in this show called Asylum, which Edgar had directed. It's the first time we ever worked with Edgar. And they were just sort of like looking for stuff. It was a very fertile time. They were like, you guys, you make something for us.
Right.
Because they weren't sure what. They were kind of going to young people and saying, you must know what's what.
Right.
You do something.
Yeah, come on. We need to bring in the kids.
Help us.
We're losing the kids.
Yeah, exactly. And so by sheer chance, we wound up getting, 7 episodes, which is actually one more than usual at Channel 4, without even making a pilot. And they commissioned the second season before the first season had even aired, and that just would not happen these days.
Well, it's a pretty ballsy show, because it's fresh in my mind, because I wanted to know it before I spoke to you.
Yeah.
And you could never do a character like Brian on American television.
No.
And you could never be as candid about drug use and all that other stuff in a network American comedy. Like the character that you played and also Mike and Nick Frost's character. You'd never see that shit here.
You know what was really weird was that they tried to reversion it for here. An American TV company picked it up.
They're going to remake it, like they did The Office or something.
Yeah. But they did a pilot, and it was unbelievably bad. And they removed all the references to casual drug use, and they removed all the references to guns. That because Mike is like this kind of weapon. He's like an army nut.
Right.
But you're allowed to have like howitzers in your garden in America.
That's right. They wouldn't do it.
They wouldn't allow him to talk about guns.
And I also think like the whole idea of being, on the dole or the way that Britain works in terms of unemployment, the way that Britain works in terms of, just the social fabric, enables these personalities to sort of, exist for real.
Yeah.
Here, I don't know how they'd even do that. I mean, how would they make that? I mean, there's a judgment involved in saying like, oh, these two they're not slackers, but you understand her character. She just can't get a handle on it.
Yeah.
But
people are like that.
Yeah, but the country sort of takes care of them. And here, that in and of itself would be like, ugh, he's unemployed. Look at that.
What a scumbag.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But it's sort of like just the way it is.
Yeah, it's funny looking back at it in that respect that, I mean, we felt completely unrepresented. That was what it was. We were watching a lot of shows that were on TV about 20-somethings, and they were just trying to be like friends,
right?
And they just didn't speak to us. There was nothing about us on television. And Jess and I thought, let's make a show about us,
right,
and put it on TV, and,
right.
And it spoke to so many people. The response was so kind of passionate that we realized that there were lots of other people just like us around, that had the same kind of concerns and neuroses and insecurities, and not everybody was really good looking.
That's right. And it was a big hit.
Yeah, it was. I mean, in a critically and in a cult way, it was on Channel 4. So it got like a few million viewers every Friday night. It used to be on After Friends. So we pick up a little bit of their audience, and it's endured. In 2008, we came out on a tour of the States because it was released on DVD finally here, and it was insane the amount of people that came out to get it signed who'd owned it on, Yeah,
there's a lot of people here that love.
And now it's on Netflix. It's like, this is just a little show. Yeah.
I had Dylan Moran in here, and he
you did?
Yeah. And he was talking about his series.
Yeah. Black Books.
Yeah, Black Books.
Brilliant, yeah.
Which I had to, I have to watch this, and it was amazing because you don't see stuff like that.
Yeah.
You just don't see stuff like that here that has a discomfort, that has an edge to it, that has characters that you don't necessarily like.
Well,
but,
even like a show like Big Bang Theory, which is on here, which is dealing with a kind of subcultural element.
Right.
They're all still really good looking, and they all wear different clothes every day. And
also they're joke delivery machines. Like, what American television seems to be, when it's successful, sadly, what it seems to do is like, all right, we've got our puppets.
And
we know what they need to say.
Yeah.
And you basically see the same show over and over again.
Absolutely. And it's kind of relentlessly. It's a different dynamic. There's less room to be. And if there is emotion, it's quite sentimental. It's suddenly like on a very special episode of Blossom.
Yeah. Right. But none of the guys, on Big Bang Theory are dealing with a sexual identity crisis.
Yeah.
They're not dealing with drugs. They're not like in any casual or at all. Where to have a guy like Brian, who, is sexually ambiguous and also has this weird, idea that he's an artist. It was like, I loved it.
Yeah.
I mean, I loved all the characters, but I know this is old news, but I just, you don't see that.
It was nice to finally get Mark, who played Brian, into The World's End, because we've been trying to.
Yeah.
We wrote a part for him in Shaun of the Dead, but had to lose the character in the end because of timing. He couldn't be in Hot Fuzz because he hurt his back. So everyone just assumed we didn't like him anymore or something, but it was just sheer,
It is interesting that before we get into the crew that you work with in the new movie, like what are the benefits and how does it work in when you're making TV in the UK, that because usually there's only a few seasons. Here they try to get 100 episodes. I mean, that's the big goal. How do we get 100 episodes? But it seems like in the UK you're like, well, let's do the best ones we have without. Is there a thought? I mean, is every season your last in your mind, or I mean,
I don't know. I guess you never assume you're going to get another series. It's like, and I think maybe because we're trying to appeal to less people. Obviously, there's much more money in the American film television industry, and as the film industry, and the advertising's different. There are different priorities and impetus, and we thought we'll do 7 episodes, and then we did another 7 episodes, and we kind of wanted to do another series, but because we did Shaun of the Dead and everything sort of changed when we did that, and we preferred that environment to work in because working in TV, we were making a very, very ambitious show for not much money. And I don't mean in terms of what we were getting paid. I mean in terms of what we were given to make it.
Sure.
And it was hard, and it was soul destroying at times. And suddenly the film industry felt a little bit more freedom and a bit more scope.
Yeah.
And we didn't really want to go back to the kind of restrictions we've been working under.
But I think the benefit of it is, in retrospect, or I don't know if that's the right word, is that, what you end up with a lot of British TV series is that, like, they only made 20.
Well, we call it the curse of Fawlty Towers. It's like Fawlty Towers only did 2 seasons. And it became like this model. So loads of shows like The Young Ones and The Office and Space as well. It's this sort of 2-season thing. It's like the cool number. I think some of those shows, I think Ricky Gervais's Office could have gone on a lot longer.
Sure.
And it should have done.
Right.
It would have saved us 2 series of extras if he'd done that. Do you know what I mean?
So it had its moments.
It would have been.
That moment with David Bowie on Extras is.
See, I hated that though, because it's like, that wouldn't happen. There was never a VIP area in the Groucho Club.
Right.
And David Bowie would never have sung that song.
Absolutely. But
that was just Ricky saying, I know David Bowie.
All right. I agree. But I guess I'm a fan of Bowie, and to see him keep repeating it was sort of funny.
It was funny.
Are you friends with Ricky Gervais?
I am, yeah. We sort of.
It's possible to be friends with Ricky Gervais?
We have a friendship of sorts. Ricky's an incredible. Publicly, he has zero humility.
Yeah.
He would never say anything nice about anyone. He's incredibly competitive, and it's not enough that he be the best. Everyone else has to die horribly. In person, he actually has some humility, and he's very sweet. And
are you telling me that's a character,
or be a nice guy?
Which one is the real Ricky?
I think the real Ricky is probably the public one.
Okay.
No, the real one is the guy that you meet and you have dinner with, and he's very funny and personable and nice. The public Ricky is a dick sometimes. He says things. He's never said anything nice about anyone. He's said horrible things about us.
Really?
And in person, he'll tell me that he wrote. They used to write sketches for me before they did The Office because.
Sure. Why wouldn't he tell you that?
But then he'd say, but I'd never say that in public. And I'm like, oh, cheers, thanks.
Yeah, that's great. Good.
So I hate public Ricky, but I like private Ricky.
Okay. I understand that. That was diplomatic. All right, so let's talk about the relationship between you and Nick Frost and Edgar Wright, because it seemed that I don't know where it came from, whether it was the writing or Edgar's vision, but it seemed that even from Space, that genre play, and it was really a style that you guys didn't invent. I mean, there seems to be a pace to the way you fool around with formats that I think might be original to you. Is it?
I don't know. I think with Spaced, it was simply that we never tried to jump on any kind of bandwagons or anything, but we, as I said, being a child of the 70s, being a child of popular culture, of the TV the VCR revolution, of the demythologization of television and all that kind of stuff, we wanted to write a series about 2 people who lived their lives through the prism of popular culture.
Okay.
So Spaced was almost like...
So that was the agenda. You said...
it was like...
Who'd you sit down and have that conversation with?
It was me and Jessica, basically.
Oh, so...
We wanted to write a flat share sitcom about 2 people whose... It was almost like the show was like how they described their lives.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God, I went into the bank and it was like the Matrix, but you just saw it all literally, you know,
Right.
all those kind of references were like,
But Cuckoo's Nest, I mean, that was a weird pull, and it was kind of great.
Yeah.
I mean, you milked that one more than most of them.
yeah, that was
because you
quite an
just loved it.
extended metaphor.
Yeah.
But that was like, imagine, you know, your friend came back from a restaurant and said, oh my God, the kitchen, it was like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Right.
But instead of relating that, we actually show it. You know, that was the idea.
Yeah, it's great. But that style has defined your entire career.
Yeah.
In terms of your output.
Well, in that way, we were trying to use those references as little Trojan horses to say certain things about their lives. And what we did with the movies was on a grander scale. So we appropriate like the zombie movie, and which is something a lot of people recognize, and use that as a way to do a film about friendship and relationships. You know, because that's what it's about,
with
really.
Your friend tied in the backyard.
Yeah. It's about letting go of old friendships and moving on and being an adult. You know, Hot Fuzz was also a kind of about male friendship and about how sometimes you have to dumb down a little bit if you want to get something done. And we've dressed that up as a cop film. You know, The World's End is a film about the dangers of nostalgia and the loss of identity, but we use a science fiction film to say that. So,
right, personal identity and cultural identity.
Yeah, so kind of popular culture is like our kind of palette. It's like that's what we use to say. That's our reference grid. You know,
right. But it also works to. The strange thing is I understand that as a vision and as a way of saying, like, well, that's what I grew up with, so that's how I see the world. But I mean, by doing what you do, you were able to sort of put a lot of heart into really kind of pretty cutting satirizations and also homages of these forms. You know,
it's like I think you know. If you look at the poets or whatever, but of the past, you know, they always use metaphor to get ideas across, to communicate emotions. That's what we're doing, except what we're drawing on is a far more sort of facile kind of bunch of things, which is film and TV and video games, you know.
Right.
But people get it. I think that's why Shaun of the Dead ended up opening some doors for us here, because the American audience recognized the language we are using, which is zombie movies, because it's an American tradition, you know, it's from Romero. So that's how we managed to bridge the cultural gap a little bit, I think.
And has that been why do you think, I guess we can talk about that, is that, you know, I know there definitely is an audience in America for British comedy.
Yes.
And everything British.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a very odd thing, because there are some people that it's like, oh, I don't care what it is, as long as it has that accent.
Sounds so important.
What do you think that is? Have you ever thought about it? The people who are Anglophiles who you've talked to in your life?
Yeah.
Do you think it's what do you think drives that?
I think part of it is that it's a different perspective in exactly the same language. There's a big thing with us is that we speak the same language.
Right.
That's why there are so many British actors in Hollywood. It's not because British actors are better than actors in Europe. It's that we speak the same language.
Yeah.
And there's a point of connection for us which enables us to kind of swap.
Right.
It's a different perspective. I think, you know, I get that sometimes. It's so weird when you say something on the phone, you know, to an American and they go, oh my God, you sound so sophisticated.
Yeah, yeah.
And you're like, well, I just asked for a burrito. Wow.
Pasta.
Yeah.
Is that how you say it?
Pasta. I don't know. It's a strange thing. Maybe it's because maybe because this is a relatively new country, and Britain is ancient, and there's a kind of the obsession with the royal baby over here has been phenomenal. I mean, people keep saying, "Oh my God, has she had it yet?" And we're like, "What? Who? What?
Oh, them?
Oh, them?"
Yeah.
You know, and it's because of that kind of sense of history, and I'm always.
It's like Star Wars to us.
Yeah. Well, that's
it's like
interesting.
Game of Thrones to us.
When you look at Star Wars, in Star Wars, all the older characters, all the sort of slightly more, the villains and the characters of authority, they're all usually played by British actors. Even the older Jedis, because they represent an older order.
Right.
And all the youngsters, they're all American and thrusting and you know.
That's smart shit.
Yeah, that's what it was saying, you know. And they were trying to leave this old order behind in a way and get away from this imperialistic idea, which I think was with the British.
But, yeah, absolutely.
And yet still they come back to it, you know, and I think as the world's getting smaller with the internet and stuff and YouTube and our ability to share each other's culture a bit more, like BBC America's on now, this whole interest in British television is bigger than ever now.
Do you think there's a difference in the audience? I mean, I know you've spoken to it before, but, you know, I guess I can only speak for myself. You know, I liked Python, and I think that my experience with British comedy was that it always seemed more broad, less personal, a little bit more, sort of, bigger, but like, when I watch something like your show, like Spaced or The Office or anything else, is that, was there a time in British comedy that you can identify where something that was more prevalent in America, which was, speaking, in an erotic way or self-effacing way or like, without romanticizing things or wigs and stuff? Was there a shift in England?
I don't know. Maybe. It's interesting in a way because what I remember from American comedy as a kid was very broad, because basically we were seeing each other's mainstream output, even Python, because the way that became popular here is incredible. The Hollywood Bowl thing, I still look at that and think, how did that happen?
I just remember someone telling me about it, and it was on PBS here.
Yeah.
It was like the public, broadcasting network, and no one fucking watched that.
It was probably so exotic.
And it came on late at night, and it was on film. It looked like it was film. It didn't look like television. I'm like, who the fuck are these guys, and what is going on here?
But when I talk about, so many times here, if I meet someone who's not, maybe not the kind of person who would be into Shaun of the Dead, and you mention British comedy, they'll go, "Oh, Benny Hill."
Yeah.
Are You Being Served? Or, stuff that was, and I'm sure there were smaller things that were going on in America that we never saw, much more personal, much more smarter, drier.
I think that's probably right.
Nowadays, that stuff it's easier to access it. Like I can watch Portlandia now, even though it's not on British TV, because I can watch it on the internet.
Right.
Shows like Curb Your Enthusiasm or Larry Sanders, which was an incredible show.
A great show.
Towards the end of the 90s, we started to get access to each other a little more and realize what was going on underneath, the more personal stuff. And that, that coincides with Spaced and the rise of shows like, even Seinfeld and Curb and.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's funny. There was a time in America where all we got, I think, was Masterpiece Theater, Benny Hill, and Monty Python.
Yeah.
Right. Alistair Cook's talking about things. I
know.
As a child.
I mean, you just sort of, I would just hang my head in shame whenever anyone, oh yeah, Benny Hill. No! Some sort of chubby old pervert chasing a bald man and some women
Did anyone
in a bikini.
Respect him in Britain?
He was very popular in the same way that kind of stuff. There is a broad comedy here that would be very popular.
Right. I guess that's true. Because I know there was a lot of underground guys and around punk rock, like because Munnery, but Munnery, it's like he's hard to wrap your brain around.
Absolutely, he's willfully kind of goes against what you expect.
And Kitson is a genius, and it's like you don't know where that comes from.
Well, in the same way that people like Lenny Bruce would actively try to die on stage just to challenge you. That kind of stuff is terribly exciting.
So the new movie, it was interesting because I went to see, it was weird because I wanted to see it before I talked to you. They wouldn't send me a screener, and I couldn't make the screening. And then it got down to this sort of like they're doing one for you. I'm like, oh my god! So go to the screening room in Beverly Hills. I didn't know what to expect, and when it opens with you in that AA meeting, I'm like, well, this is interesting. This is gonna be some deep shit here, and we're gonna go through a journey that this is a personal struggle with substance. I can relate to this, and then all of a sudden it's like, what happened in the men's room? Where did this go? It's a pretty amazing turn.
Yeah.
And for me, like the poetry of it and what it was saying about culture was great. Because I'm not a huge sci-fi guy.
Yeah.
So there was part of me that's like, oh, here we go. But then by the end, I was like, well, there's a real message here about nostalgia. It was
and
great.
the important thing as well is that when that left turn happens in the movie, and it is a heck of a left turn.
Yeah.
It doesn't stop being about what it started to be about, which is the pub crawl. That's what Gary is there to do.
Right.
And in a way, the fact that he continues it and uses it as an excuse to carry on with it, it says a lot about how selfish addicts are, you know, and
definitely.
And how kind of focused they are on getting what they want in the next minute.
Right.
And not thinking about tomorrow or anything like that. And that's Gary all the way, he's kind of... He uses essentially a kind of,
no matter how apocalyptic things are going to get, he's going to get all those beers in.
I'm going to drink my beers because that's all he cares about. It's a suicide mission for Gary. And in the end, it's like essentially an intergalactic intervention is what happens in the end. He's back in a circle at the end of the film. So
when you came up with the film, I mean, and you put an addict at the center of it, was that the seed of the idea?
What happened was Edgar and I were traveling from Sydney were in Wellington again, weirdly enough, and we were traveling to Sydney, and Edgar had this idea about a film about a pub crawl when he was younger called Crawl. He'd written it, and it was about 5 19-year-old boys on this night out.
Yeah.
And he suddenly, we'd shot World's End, the Hot Fuzz in his hometown. And so both of us had this experience of going back to our hometowns, because I lived quite near to him when I grew up. And sensing this odd feeling of familiarity and alienation. Everything's the same, and yet it's totally different. And
we get that here too.
Yeah,
it's for the same reason.
Partly it's different because you've changed. Partly it's different because other things have come. There are new shops in the high street. People don't recognize you. And we thought it'd be funny to have that, to make a film about that sense of ennui, but it's because it's been invaded by alien robots. Yeah. That was the kind of thing. It was a really serious setup. And then we went away for 6 years.
But is that a moment that when you and Edgar have that moment, like, do you say like, well, that sounds pretty, deep and a little bit disturbing. Let's relieve ourselves.
Well, let's use it's feeling a bit too honest. We should try and
You experience that though?
Yeah, we thought it's a bit too earnest,
Because you're like, leave that to Mike Lee.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. I mean, Shaun of the Dead was supposed to be like a Mike Lee film with zombies, and with World's End, it was like this is too real. We need to tip it on its side a bit, so we'll bring in the sci-fi element, but. It never is just about that. The sci-fi element just exacerbates everything.
Right.
It invigorates Gary to carry on with the pub crawl. He thinks that continuing the pub crawl is the only way to go. He doesn't really. He just wants to finish his beers, but he convinces the other guys that we should keep going. This is important. And they just follow him because they fall back into their old roles.
And also, like, by the middle of the movie, you realize that none of the other guys were that happy.
No, exactly.
Like that, all your suppositions, or the character of Gary's suppositions about their lives was off.
Yeah.
And that, they were having their own problems, which I think is also...
Yeah, we don't prescribe any kind of... It's not like you should grow up and get married and have kids and get a job. What we're kind of saying is the most important thing is that you're happy.
Yeah.
Whatever that is, it's happiness. Gary's not happy because he's an alcoholic and he's depressed and
he never snapped out of it.
No, he never snapped out. And the rest of the guys are kind of, they all say about Stephen, he's got a company, but it got bought out and he's less stressed. And Andy's doing corporate law when he really wanted to do family law. And so no one's happy.
Right.
And this is sort of reflected as the night goes on.
That evolution of the characters happens. But I imagine during the shooting of that, you're like, how do we balance it?
Yeah,
because like once enough of that stuff starts flying around and the alien thing becomes, all invasive.
Yeah.
It becomes sort of hard to have those reflections of sort of like, I'm not happy.
Yeah, I know. But what it becomes then is about nostalgia, about the fact that there's a speech in the movie that Eddie Marsan's character makes about this bully that he sees and who doesn't recognize him, and he's pissed off because he says it's like it all meant nothing, And
that's a great moment.
Yeah, and childhood does mean something, and the relationships we have when we're kids, all our emotional barometer is set when we're very small and very young, and all the stuff that happens when we're kids, it's not a rehearsal for life, it is life.
It's how you're wired.
Yeah, it's totally, and you can't just go back and see all those people and see the kid that beat you up in the toilets and go, do you remember that day? Man, I was so bleeding. It still hurts.
Yeah, and the greatest thing that can happen, if you have the fortitude for it, is to go to your 25th high school reunion. Just to see those jocks, all fat and bald, and you're like, I'm gonna let that go, I guess.
Yeah,
look what happened,
and not be bitter about it, or not.
Right.
And the fact is, in the movie, it's only after a few beers that they all return back to how they used to be. They fall into line. It's Andy becomes the protector, and Steve's like the second in command. And
it's interesting that in that movie, and also in Space, the dynamic between you and Nick Frost is that, like, you did some fucked up thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
That, kind of remains unspoken for a good portion of it.
Yeah. Gary's a terrible... I mean, he's like the villain of the film as much as he is the hero.
What's your relationship with Nick in real life?
We've known each other for 20 years, and we met as humans, not as actors.
Where?
In Cricklewood in North London. I moved to London from Bristol University in early 90s. My girlfriend at the time got a job at a Mexican restaurant nearby, came back one night and said, there's a guy at work, he's really funny, I think he kind of wants to do stand-up, do you think you can put him in touch with a few clubs? I was like, I've been doing it like a year. I thought I was like Yoda. I'll give you a list. And then, so I took him out to his first few gigs. I met him at a party, and we got on really well straight away, and I took him out to a few gigs. He kind of did 10 gigs in the end. 5 were great, 5 were the lowest point in his life.
So that's where that dynamic started.
Yeah.
Why'd you get me into this?
Well, it was kind of, but he was like, all the time I was like, he's literally the funniest person I've ever met.
Sure.
He makes me laugh like nobody else. And I was my social circle was comedians, and none of them were as funny as Nick. And I was like, how does this work?
Oh, yeah.
But he couldn't quite translate his natural funniness.
Isn't that interesting?
To a performance. Yeah, it's fascinating.
It happens a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, there are guys that I know, like, off stage, it's like, oh my God, how come you're not?
Yeah.
And then they get on stage and there was this one guy who was like an improvisational genius.
Yeah.
Off stage, and you just want to hang around him. And then he'd get on stage and he'd do the same fucking 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Every time. And you're like, why aren't, we were just
weird,
in the car.
There's a process, and I don't know what it is, but he
couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And does he know what it was? I mean, it was
I think
a comfort level?
Stuck at it. He was embarrassed, and he was nervous on stage.
Sure.
I cut my teeth in the university comedy clubs where it's quite a partisan crowd. They were quite nice to you. So my confidence grew there. And you know what it's like. Half the struggle is confidence. And he never quite nailed that.
Right. You got to spend most of your career pretending like you're not afraid.
Exactly.
And then one day it's like, oh, it's gone.
Yeah. And then suddenly you can take on anybody.
Yeah, exactly.
So 5 years later, we've been just become friends, best friends, and Jess and I got the opportunity to write Space, and Nick used to do this character for us, for shits and giggles in the pub, of Mike, the territorial army guy, the kind of reservist guy who was. And I said to Nick, look, if I write this character into this sitcom, will you just be in the sitcom? Because you can't be a fucking waiter forever when you're this talented. And he's like, all right. And that's how it happened, So we were friends a long time before we were colleagues,
That's the other thing about Spaced and especially about Space, is that you had all these weird, there was, the sexuality.
Yeah.
Issues of Brian and of Mike and of your friendship. It's sort of like, you never see that. It's sort of like, what's going on? Yeah.
Well, Nick, that's the funny thing is Nick and I, when we when the girl that introduced us basically was my girlfriend at the time, she very unceremoniously dumped me for this other guy, and it was awful. And that actually formed the basis of Space, that whole being dumped by a girl. So I went to live with Nick in his crab pit flat in Cricklewood. I used to sleep on his floor.
Yeah.
And then, after one day, he said, just get in the bed and sleep top to tail with me. So we slept top to tail for a while. And then eventually it was so comfortable that, nothing was going to happen. We were quite confident with our sexuality. Yeah. We'd sleep next to each other, like Laurel and Hardy.
Yeah.
And so for the longest time, we had this really easy physical relationship where there was no kind of, get off me, you fag, kind of silliness. And that became the basis of Mike and Tim's relationship. It was a very easy male relationship where you can be affectionate with each other, you can love each other, and it doesn't have to be some, and even if it does turn into something, which it didn't, but if it does, it's okay.
Yeah, well, that was coming.
So what? We needed to do that. We cleared the air. So our sort of our friendship over the years, and this, we always sort of flinch at this sort of bromance buzzword that's come up, as if there's no equivalent for women, because it's not weird if women are friends.
Right.
Suddenly it's such a modern phenomenon that guys can be honestly friends with each other and not have to pat each other on the back. They can actually,
like, hey bro, come here, man. Yeah, a little of that.
Because of because of homosexual terror that straight guys have.
And macho garbage.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Now there has to be this word for it, and it's crazy.
It is. It's sad, is what it is.
It is totally sad.
But now with Edgar, like in terms of the style of like again from watching Spaced, that the sort of quick cut and the games and the the punchlines that are the fast moving camera and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Now, was that something that he was doing before he met you, or is that something you guys came up with together? Is that his thing?
That's his thing. I think he kind of, when you look at his early films that no one saw, I think there's one on the Hot Fuzz DVD. It's like on High 8 Video or something, like a cop thing. Yeah. That was his thing, and I think because he was a big fan of Sam Raimi, he was a big fan of the Coen brothers. Like Raising Arizona is a absolute.
You know what? I see that there's sort of a template for
absolutely.
What you can do.
And that was for both of us. That was a film where we thought, so the camera can be funny as well, and the direction can be funny, and it's not just pointing the camera at funny people. You can say stuff with the way that the camera whizzes in on something.
Yeah. Oh, that was the big mind blower.
And for Edgar, it was like when Jess and I wrote Spaced, we were like, we need someone who can bring this. We don't know how to do this visually.
Yeah.
We'd written the scripts, but we didn't have a visual language for it. And Edgar was the last part of that jigsaw. And we always, even though Edgar didn't write the show, he's the third writer on the show in terms of, because he wrote the look of it. You know?
Oh yeah, well he was able to sort of like kind of do these weird homages that were satiric but dead on.
Yeah.
To things. And is he as much of a film TV nerd as you are?
More so. He's so fluent in cinema. He speaks cinema. You know, he's totally possessed by it all, and he's more knowledgeable about film than I am.
So Raising Arizona, man. That movie was a big influence.
Yeah.
Do you know what that character is based on?
H.R. McDonough?
No. Wile E. Coyote from the Roadrunner.
Really?
How fucking great is that? So they were doing a riff almost like you guys did.
Yeah.
Because if you think of the Roadrunner cartoons.
Because doesn't he have a Roadrunner tattoo on his arm? Yeah, he does. Yeah.
But Wile E. Coyote just, he's the sympathetic guy that just gets fucked every time by that bird.
Yeah.
And when I heard that that's what he was based on, I was like, those guys are geniuses.
It is a brilliant movie, and I love the Coen Brothers. When you look at the variation in what they've
Unbelievable.
done, the outright crazy comedy of that movie, and then compared to like Blood Simple or Miller's Crossing or
No Country.
I'd love to be able. I hope we're allowed to do that one day. I hope we're allowed to make a really serious movie, you know.
You can decide that.
Yeah, but it's down, the audience might not want you to, you know. Sometimes they're like, it's like, you said about Partridge, and you're going, come on, do your funny thing.
But you've done serious roles.
I have, yeah.
I mean, it seems like you've had an opportunity to, was there a point there where you felt like, I'm going to go that route?
I don't know. It's weird in a way, because comedy. If you're a dramatic actor, you're allowed to do comedy. But if you're a comedy actor, people are less inclined. You see people like Jim Carrey or Steve Martin, Woody Allen. Those guys who, particularly like Woody Allen, who resolutely went serious, or they get frustrated because. Jim Carrey is a classic example. He did films like even Cable Guy, which is a comedy, but it was darker. The audience are like, no, where's your alrighty then thing? And, and he clearly wants to do, he has acting chops, Jim Carrey. He wants to do more serious stuff, but you can see there's a kind of frustration that he's not permitted to do it because he's so outrightly funny as a...
Well, he keeps trying.
He does.
But what was your experience? Did you feel that? Did you feel that when you did it that there was a backlash? Or was it within you?
I don't know yet. I haven't. I just did a show for Frank Darabont's doing, who did The Majestic weirdly with Jim Carrey. In fact, I wore Jim Carrey's jacket in this thing. It's a strange circularity.
Do you know him?
No, I don't.
Uh-huh.
But Frank did the Shawshank Redemption and Green Mile, and he's doing a show for TNT called Lost Angels, which is all about the 40s era struggle between the Cohen gang and the LAPD. Mm-hmm. Really, it's great. It's going to be amazing. Yeah, Mickey Cohen and Bugsy Siegel.
Yeah.
That period when Bugsy Siegel went to Las Vegas and Mickey Cohen took over all the rackets. And there was that kind of, it's the LA Confidential period,
Yeah.
And I did a guest spot in the pilot for that show as a comic actually called Hecky Nash, and it's a really serious role, and it was fantastic fun to do just because it was so different, and he's American and so I'm playing completely against type, and I hope what's nice is that he's a comic, so I kind of, there's a little segue.
Sure. But you're afraid.
I'm not afraid. I like serious acting.
I mean, you've done, but I guess you've done. Well, I mean, the Star Trek movies. I mean, it's serious.
Yeah, but I'm still like the funny guy, aren't I?
Yeah.
I'm still like comic relief.
Yeah. Bring that guy in.
Yeah.
You're the funny guy. Did that have an impact on you as a nerd?
Star Trek
to be part of that movie where you're like, I can't believe I'm on the Enterprise.
Absolutely, it was crazy. When I first put on my uniform, it was like, this isn't happening. I stepped onto the bridge for the first time. It was ridiculous. I mean, all the kind of, that stuff. I watched that show as a kid. I loved that show, and to become part of it was just insane.
Have you met any of these people that had these the effect on your life, like Lucas or?
Yeah, we worked for Spielberg. Nick and I did. We were in Tintin, and that was.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. We got to chat to. I met Lucas once and had a kind of interesting conversation with him, and
about what?
About
Phantom Menace.
Well, no. See, I went. This was at the as the huge hypocrite that I am. I went to the premiere of Revenge of the Sith, the third one, and arguably the least crap
of the new ones. Yeah,
and I got introduced to him at the. He was talking to Ron Howard.
Yeah,
and this guy who worked for Lucasfilm sort of took me over, and I saw the light go out in George Lucas's eyes when he turned around and saw me, because it was like, oh, here's another sort of mid-30s fanboy who's going to,
right,
goo all over me. And Ron Howard saw me and went, "Oh, hey, Shaun of the Dead, you know, and my kids love your movie." And he shook my hand. And Lucas kind of changed completely and was like, "Oh, okay." So I immediately got a little in with him, and he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "We're making this movie. I think we were doing Hot Fuzz at the time." And he said, "Oh, you know what? Let me give you a piece of advice. In 30 years' time, don't be making the same movie you made 30 years ago." And I went, "Okay."
Yeah.
Which is a very interesting thing to say, you know.
Yeah, because he does that.
Yeah. And it was weird. And I suddenly warmed. I was nothing but warm to him, irrespective of the new films. He's still George Lucas.
Yeah, sure.
But it was an interesting insight into him as a man, you know. He kind of almost regretted it a little bit.
Right, it's weird when you see that, isn't
he seemed a bit lost, you know. I suddenly saw him as
all
being
alone with billions of dollars.
Yeah.
The poor guy.
My heart bleeds.
Yeah, I hope he's okay.
Yeah, it was totally. But there was a sadness. I felt like, you know, he'd become this corporation, and no one was saying no to him anymore. And I felt like he kind of almost wanted someone to say, "George, no,
do something. Yeah,
don't do that.
Do THX 1138 again. If you're going to remake one, make a cryptic, weird one. It's disturbing.
Yeah.
Well, no, I think that's that speaks to it's a good lesson to learn. I mean, even when I asked you about serious roles, there's a fear there. There's a fear of the audience turning on you.
And you know what it is as well is that as a comedian.
Yep.
And you feel sometimes that people don't take you seriously simply because your profession is by its very nature non-serious. You're a comedian. You're a funny person. Comedy is a break from seriousness.
Right.
That's what it is.
Right.
And so comedy as an art form isn't taken particularly seriously. I mean, it's changing a little bit, but there's no Oscar for best comedy. There's no Oscar for best comic performance.
Right.
And yet you would argue that, you know, there are a lot of serious actors who can't do comedy. There are a lot of Oscar-winning actors who can't make you laugh.
I think it's seen as more disposable for some reason.
I think it is. And I think it's because it's non-serious.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
It's like, it loses credibility by its very nature.
It's so fucked up, though, because that classic quote that everybody quotes is that, the only thing harder than dying is comedy or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, and
it's true.
And people know, how difficult it is. And certainly the personality of the comic is well explored as this dark, brooding disaster.
So, exactly. And so comics, who are by their very nature slightly insecure because they require immediate validation, constantly feel underestimated because no one takes them seriously.
That's right.
So that's why they want to do serious stuff. So someone actually says, "Oh, you're good."
Right. Well, maybe that's the agenda of the industry. It's like, we got to keep these guys nervous. They're gonna get cocky, and we're not gonna be able to get funny out of them.
Yeah, it's good. Oh my God, conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
It's great talking to you, Simon.
You too, buddy.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.